Hey everybody, welcome back to Starting Out Solitary. Blind Rob here, subbing in once more, as always. This is week 241, and we're discussing, or more like, we're talking about our recommendations for books, either fiction or nonfiction, regarding paganism, witchcraft, etc., etc. So, I made a list. And keep in mind, there are a ton of books that I could recommend for people. But because I'm long-winded to begin with by nature, I decided to cut my list very short and only cover a few books that I feel are super important for very specific topics. Actually, even for those specific topics that I'll be recommending some books for here in a moment, I actually didn't list all the books I could have. Once again, I wanted to keep this as short as possible. That's probably not going to work out. I always try to make this shorter than what I usually do. But hey, what are you going to do? I guess it's just in my nature to be long-winded. But anyway, so even though I'm in the process of rebuilding my practice as far as Norse spirituality goes, because I'm still very much in the process of rebuilding it, I'm going to focus more on Irish spirituality, Gaelic spirituality, and just it as Irish/Gaelic polytheism, paganism, Bhride/Bhride, both her as a goddess as well as Bridgeting practice, and the fairy faith, which are all aspects of my practice as an Irish pagan, Irish polytheist. Oh, yeah. One other book I will be recommending, I almost forgot. Or two other things. Kind of goes along. One book I will be recommending is one that I found really important as far as my practice as a bard, as a fili. And while it doesn't go in anything, if at all, about filiac in specific, it's just I find it a really good book, for the person who wants to be a bard, who wants to write, to craft poetry, to craft songs and whatnot. Primarily poetry, and while it specifically doesn't go into the magic side of things of that practice, I still find it to be a good book. Another thing, I will be talking also about my favorite book for Ogham. Ogham, the alphabet system, which is primarily used for magic, for divination, and, is it's a cornerstone of my practice as a bard and as a fili. And it's, something that a lot of people talk about, a lot of people ask about, a lot of people wonder about. So, yeah. With all that said, let's dive right in. I wrote down a list of the key books, one of which I forgot to write down the name of the author. So, when I mention the book and when I go to upload this video, I will type down in the description box down below the names of all the books that I list and recommend here, along with the author names, as well as links to either Amazon or Lulu, where you can find copies of them if they are books that you yourself would like to get copies of. Okay, so I'll start with fiction because I have less fiction books on fiction based on or inspired by paganism than I do nonfiction books. In fact, there's only one book series I've ever read that is specifically based off of paganism, neo-paganism. And honestly, there are parts of me that are surprised that I love this book series. And it is called Circle 3 and is by Isabel Bhride. It's a book series about a group of girls, teenage girls, who in one way or another end up becoming Wiccan, and they basically form their own coven. And each book in the series focuses on one of the girls as part of this coven, and the adventures and the shenanigans that they go through in their life, either as their personal life or in their magical lives, finding issues. Some of the topics that are discussed in some of the books are discrimination, about being a witch, about being a Wiccan in high school, about relationships, love life, interfaith relationships, some of the ethics and morality behind magic, so on and so forth. I'm not Wiccan at all, and I've never been Wiccan. But I just love this book series, partly because I've always been a fan of young adult novels, even when I was a young adult, young adult / teenager. But I just really enjoy it. Even after all these years, it's one of my favorite book series. And like I said, it's the only book series that I've read that is specifically based on neo-paganism. And while I do not practice, what my practice is completely different than what is being discussed as the religious source material that is being that this series of books is based off of, even though it's fiction. It is interesting. There are some vague similarities. There's been a couple of times it's like, face discrimination. I've been there. Faced that. So and especially when I was that age. So it is interesting to read and see the parallels to some extent. Now, the other book series, and before I get into that, I just want to say that I know that there are other book series that are based on neo-paganism, different neo-pagan faiths, so on and so forth, just like Circle 3. I just haven't had a chance to find any and read them yet. So, yeah, that's the only reason why there's only one book series for me to really recommend there. The second fiction book series isn't based on paganism specifically. It's actually a high fantasy novel series, medieval fantasy, sort of swords and magic, knights and wizards, mages, so on and so forth. But the reason why I'm going to recommend this book. I would recommend the series in general, but the reason why I recommend this in this video is because the book series, it's actually a group of book series, but they're connected in one single world, and that is the Tortall series. That's the overarching series, and it's by Tamron Pierce. But the various book series, and I'm not sure if I can name them all, but I know there's the Song of the Lioness, there's the Immortals, there's the Trickster series, and then there is Protector of the Small, and there's also the Rebecca Cooper series, and she's working on a new series that's about one of my two favorite characters, and it's called something along the lines of Slaughter and Tempests or something like that. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. Eye is itching. So yeah, but the reason why I recommend this book series, or this group of book series, is because there is a good bit about religion, and specifically about gods. It's very much like the world of Tortall is very much a hard polytheist world. The gods in this universe are very much their own individual beings with their own power, their own agency, and their interactions with each others and their interactions with their people is just amazing. And I've known a few people among the years who were inspired by some of these books, not so much the high fantasy or the magic within it, but just the relationships with the gods to form and start their own practice of devotional style polytheism. Also, the fact that each of these book series typically, though I don't think I won't say always, because I know for the fact that Slaughters and Tempest has a male character as the main protagonist, but all the other book series besides that one always features a female protagonist as the main character focused on in the series, which I think is an awesome change from what is considered the typical norm of fantasy books, where you usually see a male lead. Now, there are main male protagonists in each of these series. Each of these series, and most, if not all, of these series as part of this overarching universe usually contains about 4 books. But while there are main male protagonists, the books almost always focuses specifically on the female protagonist, which I think is awesome. Also, one of what is considered the main deities of this universe, which is their trickster god, and is the main deity that shows up in the Trickster series, is, among other things, a god of transgender people. And as someone who is bigender myself, which isn't necessarily quite the same as transgender, somewhat connected, I don't know, I find that awesome. Okay, so fiction books aside, let's dive right in to some of the non-fiction books I would recommend for Irish spirituality, Irish paganism / Irish polytheism, for bardcraft, for working with or the fairy faith, all interconnected, so on and so forth. Okay, and as also for the goddess Bhride. Excuse me. And I'm going to go down the list from top to bottom. Excuse me. Each grouping of books is listed by the author. So the first book is the Clann Bhride Book of Hours, and it is a collection of essays, poetry, devotional pieces by Clann Bhride, which is a devotional religious organization / order, if you will, of people who are Brigidine, who are devoted either to the goddess Bridget / Bhride, or the saint, the Christian saint Bridget, or they simply I've even seen some people who are more pantheistic or panentheist, I'm not sure how to pronounce that particular word, who to them their name that they use for the aspect of nature as they see it as a deity is Bridget. And I myself am a part of this religious order / organization / community. The different only thing is I wasn't a part of it when this book was put together, when this book was written, so I had no part in this. But I know all the people who did, and they're all great people. People that I consider awesome people, awesome Brigidine people. And the community is a great community. And this book is just awesome as far as a introductory book about general, non-denominational Brigidine practice. Though, due to the nature of the fact that, Bridget is connected to a specific culture, or group of cultures, there are aspects of the book that is connected to talking about those group of cultures insofar as they're connected to this goddess. But yeah. Now, keep in mind there are aspects of the book that I disagree with, which I can more or less say the same thing for every book I recommend here. Unfortunately, I do not remember what some of those are. I just remember they're like little things, little nitpicky things. Just off the top of my head, I know the majority of the people who in Clann Bhride, more or less, of course not all of them, and I know for a fact not all of them because I'm a member there as well, but I know a large portion of the group considers Bridget as a mother figure. I do not. That's not the kind of relationship I have with her. My relationship with her is much different. But and so that's just like kind of one of the little disagreements I have, but it's a very respectful disagreement. The next book. Okay, the next group of books is by author Morgan Daimler, I think that's how you pronounce their name. I'm not entirely sure, but I could be wrong, in which case I apologize. But they write amazing books about the fairy faith, about specific introductory books about specific deities, about Irish witchcraft, about Irish paganism. Great books. The first book that I will recommend from them is Pagan Portals, Bhride Meeting the Celtic Goddess. And this is an excellent introductory book for Bhride/Bridget, though it is very much about her specifically within the culture context of Irish, Scottish, primarily Irish culture. But it's an excellent book for anyone who is interested in Bhride, interested in knowing about Bhride, working with Bhride, worshiping Bhride, maybe even becoming a devotee of Bhride. It's definitely one of those books that I would put at the top of my list, my wish list, if I was in anyone's shoes who was, in any of those sort of check boxes, looking for good material to get one started in learning about Bhride to work with her and worship her. There is nothing bad I can say about this book whatsoever, and it's just a great book. So the next 3 books, also by I can't even speak today, I swear. The next 3 books from Morgan Daimler is on their series about fairies, about the fairy faith, their particular version of the fairy faith, as well as fairy witchcraft. These 3 books are all great books about getting one started, talking about and getting one started as far as practicing in the fairy faith, and specifically fairy with witchcraft, or to incorporate fairy witchcraft into one's own witchcraft. The first book is called Fairies, A Guide to the Celtic Fair Folk, which is very much an introductory guide, which is basically a lot of what are the kind of books that they like to write. Easy to read, easy to understand books to get one started along the way. This one is, of course, about fairies. I can't remember if it was this book or another book within this series that I had one bit of a disagreement with. Or it wasn't so much a disagreement, but it was a disappointment. And at one point, the author talks a little bit about some of the more well-known groups or species of fairies. I was kind of a little disappointed about the length and the breadth of what they wrote about those various groupings or species of fairies. It wasn't terrible, mind you. It was just when I got to that chapter in the book, it was just something that I'm like, well, that's nice. I kind of wish there was a little bit more to it than that. But hey, whatever. That's cool. I'm sure that when they get around to it, they'll write more, which I have heard that they have since working on, if not released, a book called A New Dictionary for Fairies. I still need to get that book. The next book is Fairycraft, Following the Path of Fairy Witchcraft, which is an introductory book, a how-to guide, if you will, about how to get into fairy witchcraft, specifically a kind of witchcraft that is specifically about the fairies. And it's less about a modern, general neo-pagan kind of witchcraft and more of a culturally Irish-based witchcraft, though obviously there's modern takes to it because of the fact that the author is American. Obviously they're going to have, their own personal interpretations and biases, as well as American influences and whatnot. But it is incredibly well researched, especially for an introductory 101 kind of guide. But like I said, it is very much for someone looking to get into a kind of fairy witchcraft that is very cultural based, that is very traditional, that is very much based on traditional Irish spirituality in whatever form that may take. Although, obviously, you don't necessarily need to work with the Irish gods to practice fairy witchcraft, but you do kind of need to work with the fair folk in order to practice fairy witchcraft, which one of the ways that one can get introduced or dragged into fairy witchcraft is by interacting and building relationships with the fair folk, with some of the fair folk themselves. The last book, and the one that I have read the least of, and I still need to finish it, is Traveling the Fair Path or Traveling the Fairy Path. Hold on a second. Yeah, Traveling the Fairy Path, which, from what I remember reading it, is sort of a combination of the two previous books, more so a continuation of A Fairy's A Guide to the Fair Folk, but it's more so, and also the practice, fairy witchcraft, but more so in, less so of a practice, though from what I remember reading of it, it did have a good bit about practice as well, but more so, following the faith, believing in the faith, practicing the faith, of the fairies, of honoring and venerating and working with, and to some extent even worshiping some of the fairies, especially the fairy kings and queens. Yeah, it's like I said, I actually need to finish reading it, but from what I remember reading of it, it's a really good book, and I would recommend it, just like I would recommend the other two books in this particular series. The next author I'm going to be recommending books from is, I'm going to try to pronounce this name right. I'm probably going to butcher it, in which case I apologize, as always. But Herne Rowan Laurie. And I have two books to recommend from them. The first is Ogham Weaving Word Wisdom. And this book is superb. This book is excellent. As far as I'm concerned, this is one of the two best books that is out on the market right now for Ogham. It has a very down-to-earth, back-to-basics guide to learning about all the ins and outs, how to practice, and as well as a little bit of incorporating into your magic, not just for divination, but also for magic with Ogham. But as always with the books I recommend, very much more so from a Irish paganism / Irish polytheism / modern yet traditional to some extent Irish spirituality, and less so a general modern neo-pagan point of view. This book actually gets rid of a lot of the misconceptions that a lot of people in the general neo-pagan community have about Ogham, such as all the garbage that was put forward by Robert Graves. This book is excellent. I cannot recommend it enough. Anytime I talk to someone and they're like, hey, I want to learn about Ogham, which book would you recommend about Ogham? This is automatically and immediately my go-to book to recommend. I will recommend this book until the day I die. It is just great. There are things about it that I didn't even know about Ogham, and I've been studying, learning, and practicing, reading, and working with Ogham, both in divination, magic, and religion for over a decade. And there were things that I did not know about that I read when I got a copy of this book, and I'm just like, hey, that's great. That there were things that I didn't know that I learned from this book, and that's awesome. That just makes me love this book even more. The last book that I will be recommending from them is The Well of Five Streams, essays, conversations, interviews, so on and so forth, about Irish spirituality, about Filioch, from the author's point of view. It's just a collection of different essays, different interviews, and so on and so forth that they wrote over the years, and it's just in one easy collection for people to find. And I love this book just because it has one of the most important articles / essays on Filioch that is out there and easy to find. So for that alone, this is a treasured book, in my opinion. There's a couple articles and essays that I really didn't like. I didn't really enjoy. I kind of disagreed with. That's okay. They were still great articles despite that. But yeah, I would definitely recommend this book, just like I would recommend Ogham, Ogham, weaving word wisdoms. I would recommend The Well of Five Streams just as much. The next book that I would recommend is from the author Courtney Weber, and the book is Bhride or Bhride, History, Mystery, Magic from the, or is it from or by? Let me double check that. Yeah, History, Mystery, Magic of the Celtic Goddess. Now, this is a pretty good book. It's not a great book, mind you, but it's a really good book. It's another book that I have not read yet. But despite not being an excellent book, I still say it's a really good book. There are things here and there that I disagree with. The author writes from a very Wiccan point of view. Like I said before, I'm not Wiccan. So the majority of my disconnect with this book is the fact that the author is writing understandably from a Wiccan perspective, and there are just some things, at least in my mind, that just does not compute. But other than that, this book is great. I would honestly, as far as like introductory books about learning about, getting to know, and whatnot about Bhride, I would put this book in my top five books for Bhride, but I would probably put it at the bottom of the barrel, either the number 4 or number 5 spot. But that doesn't mean I don't like this book, because I still think it's pretty good. Even the rituals, which I have participated in and tried them out myself, even though I've obviously deconstructed and reconstructed them out of a Wiccan format and reconstructed them in a Irish pagan, Irish polytheist kind of ritual format, practice format. But in my opinion, most, if not all, the rituals that are found in this book is great. And the last book, which I do not remember the author off the top of my head, but like I said, if and when I do get called upon to upload this video, I will definitely write the name of the author down in the description box, as well as a link to go buy the book if you're interested in owning a copy for yourself. But it is called Bard Song, and it is an introductory book, very much so about the path of the bard, less so about magic and more so about writing poetry based on pagan spirituality, Irish pagan spirituality. Well, Celtic spirituality in general, because there are some poems that are featured in this book that are very much Welsh or Gaulish in origin, talking about specific deities from those cultures. It's not just about Irish. In fact, there's a couple of things that are more Norse leaning in here. If I remember correctly, it's more comparing and contrasting the similarities and differences between the bard and the skald. But from what I remember, that's towards the back of the book, which you will also find basic how to write poems in specific formats and specific meters that were found in these cultures. Great book. Would recommend it to anyone who is wanting to become a real-life practicing bard and is looking for material to get them started with traditional poetic meters. And yeah, that's all I have to say for this video. Take care, everybody. Have a great day. May Bhride bless. Oh, whoops! I pressed the button. I wasn't even on the right tab.